Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining this week's seminar. We have very special guests today. We have UCL medics, Zainab and Mayuri, and they're going to be talking about how to apply to medicine and their experiences in UCL. So after that, we will be going over a case study, and then we'll be doing um, the retinal membrane, and then we'll be doing the seven guiding principles of the NHS, and then we have like medical dilemmas and situations and what you would do. So that's interactive. But yeah, let's without a further ado, let's start with our guest speakers. Um, and yeah, if you guys could come up, that would be great.
Hi, thank you for having us today. I'm Mayuri and I have Zainab with me, and we're going to be talking about the medical application process with our own insights and some tips as well.
Firstly, hi, I'm Zainab. Well done for taking the initiative to join seminars like this. It truly shows resilience and it will get you far. So, before going into like how to actually get into the degree, let's start with the big question, why medicine? For most of us, it isn't just one reason. Yes, you need to enjoy sciences, but medicine is so much more than that. It's also about applying that science in a way that makes a real difference to people's lives. And a huge motivation is the opportunity to help people directly. So giving back to the community, if that's something you find rewarding, definitely medicine is the right career choice for you. Another key factor is teamwork. So, medicine is not a solo profession. You will constantly work alongside nurses, physios, pharmacists, and loads of other doctors. So, that collaboration makes healthcare dynamic and also rewarding. Again, if these are things that you like the sound of, again, it shows that it's the right choice. And medicine also appeals because it's a career of lifelong learning. So science doesn't stand still. There are always new treatments, new research, new technologies. They're always just emerging, just new information. And if you enjoy learning and adapting and refreshing your memory with constant new things, medicine will keep you engaged forever. And of course, there's variety, so no 2 days are the same. Some doctors thrive in fast-paced environments like A&E, and others love the precision of surgery, while some prefer building long-term relationships with patients in GP practices. So a medical degree keeps doors open to all these paths, and the truth is, medicine combines so many motivations. So you need to be able to also realize some of the challenges that come along with that. So yeah, next slide, please.
So now I'm going to be talking about A levels. Most medical schools do want biology, which is quite obvious why, and chemistry, because it is a difficult subject with a lot of problem solving, and this is necessary in medicine. Obviously, you will be diagnosing patients and you will be giving treatment to patients. There are exceptions to this. There are a few medical schools that allow this, but do your own research on A-level requirements on the specific university websites. The classic trio is biology, chemistry, and maths. However, you don't need to do maths, and taking maths doesn't put you at an advantage with your application. And another point that I want to make is that doing 4 or 5 subjects doesn't also put you at an advantage. Um, so I would say do a subject that you enjoy, and it's also smart to do a subject that you will do well in.
Yeah, so now let's talk about work experience. So people often think you need weeks of hospital shadowing, but that's not actually true. So Work experience, I'd say, is it's more about quality instead of quantity. So in my work experience, I actually shadowed for 3 or 4 days at A&E. And although that it's just 3 or 4 days, and you don't need to do it for 2 weeks, it's more about quality and what you've gained out of it. It's about reflecting on what you've seen and linking it to skills needed in medicine. And I'll talk about this more in the personal statement slides because you need to be able to reflect in words and be able to communicate that efficiently. So, why is work experience important? Well, it matters because it shows you've tested your motivation in the real world. So you're not just saying, I want to be a doctor. You've taken steps to see what healthcare is really like. And it also helps you decide if this is truly the path for you. For example, volunteering in a care home might not sound glamorous, but it can be incredibly valuable. And you might notice how a carer patiently explains something to a confused resident and realize how important communication is in medicine. Or you might see the importance of empathy, so importance of teamwork. So you need to be able to recognize and reflect on these things. So also, in addition to this, even non-medical roles can be relevant. So you don't need work experience, especially in hospitals specifically, although that would be great. You can still talk about a job in retail because that teaches communication and dealing with difficult situations. Even tutoring, that develops patience and adaptability. And as long as you can reflect again and explain the skills you've gained, it can strengthen your application. So it's not what did you do, it's more about what did you learn. Yeah. Next slide.
Now I'll be talking about the UCAT. So the components are verbal reasoning, decision making, quantitative reasoning, situational judgment, and now we no longer have abstract reasoning. I'm going to give you a few tips that are quite general as we don't have time to go into detail. I would say focus on your weaknesses. Um, and don't burn yourself early with too much practice. And it's important to find that correct balance. Don't neglect SJT, so situational judgment, as if you do get below band two, your chances are significantly lower. Um, with quantitative reasoning, I would say learn how to use calculator effectively, and with verbal reasoning, learn how to skim read. And there are a few YouTube videos out there that show you how to. With decision making, skip the questions with a lot of wording and then come back to them. And don't spend more than a minute on a question, as at the end of the day, all of the questions are worth the same amount of marks. I would also say use keyboard shortcuts to save time, and these can be found on the official website. And practice time questions early, as the UCAT is judging you on making on problem solving under timed pressure. As I mean, if everyone did this untimed, then it would be easy to get 2,700. So, um, so I'm going to give you some resources now as well. There are paid ones such as Medify and MedEntry with packages, which I used and I found useful, but you don't have to pay for resources. And there are non-paid ones such as Past Medicine question banks and the official UCAT website, which are also very useful. There are YouTube videos as well, such as Karma Medic and Emil Eddy. Um, I personally found Emil Eddy very useful with his timed mocks, as I could see his thought processes, and also I could see how he prioritized different questions as well, with his speed to get a high score. Um, Here's also a link with more resources, but I would say do your own research to make an informed decision, as at the end of the day, different things do work for different people.
Okay, so now actually really considering when it comes to application, what do you actually want to apply to? What are you getting yourself into? So now let's imagine you've gone into medical school. What does a degree actually look like? So firstly, you want to consider the length. So most courses are actually 5 years, but some are six, especially if there is a compulsory intercalated BSc. So that's like a intercalated, integrated BSc that you take a year out of medicine to do something you might be interested in. So I am in my third year and I'm at UCL, and UCL you have to intercalate, it's compulsory. So I am intercalating in surgical sciences, but you could intercalate in many different things like global health. You can intercalate in maths and computer science. Some people even go to different universities. I know of many people who've gone to Imperial to intercalate in management for a year. So there are a lot of options to follow. And it's of course down to you and your research. So you need to decide what you'd want out of that. So it does add an extra year, but it is a fantastic opportunity to dive deep into a subject and even publish work. There's there is clinical exposure. So moving on from the length, some universities send you into hospitals from year one. So you're talking to patients early on. So that could be something you want. But others keep the first couple of years more theory focused before clinical placements actually begin. So UCL does two preclinical years, an intercalation, and then 4, 5, 6 clinical years. So I'm pretty happy with this, but again, this is the everyone's opinions are different, so they might prefer early exposure at a healthcare setting. Um, so I'm not saying anything is better, neither is better. It really depends on what motivates you most. And also, assessment styles vary too. So, with us, expect a mix of multiple choice questions, potentially essays, and also OSCEs. So, those are practical exams where you might examine a patient, explain a diagnosis, or demonstrate empathy in a conversation. Some schools rely heavily on end of year exams, and others prefer continuous coursework. So, again, specifically for UCL, we only have an end of year exam, and that's the only thing that matters for you to progress onto the next year. And also, let's not forget teaching style. So there are three different types of teaching style: traditional, integrated, and PBL. So traditional courses separate preclinical and clinical years. Integrated courses blend science and patient contact throughout. And then problem-based learning, PBL, uses real-life cases and small group discussions to guide your learning. So think carefully about what style suits you best. It always comes down to your research and what you prefer. So do you prefer structured lectures, or do you prefer independent discussion-based learning? Do you prefer small tutorials? So again, your research. And next, there are also extras like electives, which is quite exciting because in your final year, you often get to go abroad for a placement anywhere in the world. So I know people going to Thailand, Vietnam, anywhere in the world, US, Africa, Asia. It's a unique chance to broaden your horizons and try out different types of healthcare settings and what that is like. And finally, don't underestimate the importance of student support and well-being. Medicine is a demanding degree, and having a strong support system at your university makes a huge difference. And remember, this isn't just a 5 year degree, it's 5 or 6 years of your life. So choosing a university where you'll feel happy and supported is just as important as rankings and prestige. So make sure to consider that. There are loads and loads of websites that guide you on this. Next slide, please.
So now I'll be talking about deciding on medical schools. The most important component is to apply strategically, because at the end of the day, with medicine, with all medical schools, you'll end up with a medical degree and you'll all end up in the NHS if you're going to stay in the UK. Um, so when I say strategically, I mean some medical schools have a heavy emphasis on certain aspects of the application. Um, but I would say do your own research again, look at specific university websites to see um, to see what component matters more than others, and if they look at everything equally. There are other important aspects to consider, such as location and lifestyle. Um, so, with campus universities, often different university buildings and accommodation is quite close together, whereas for city, it's more spread out. Also, distance from home. So, whether you want to stay near family or away from family, um, and then cost of living. So, in general, city universities, especially London, are a lot more expensive than campus universities. Um, so, when I say more expensive, I mean just like the cost of living and your lifestyle generally. Um, I would say also it's important to consider university teaching, which Zainab touched on earlier on. And also, you have to think of a non-medicine degree for your fifth choice, but bear in mind that your medical application will also will be submitted for this. So it's best to think of a medicine related degree. But however, I would say to be strategic with this and not to apply for universities with courses that are competitive, as this is your safety option. And generally, it will be a lot harder for a medical applicant to get an offer for certain degrees. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now the part that actually most people dread, the personal statements. So I'd say, first off, the golden rule, don't just list, reflect. Universities aren't looking for a CV. They actually just want an insight into who you are and why you're suited for medicine. So I believe there are three questions now. Before it used to be just a chunk of text. But a good way to structure in general is to have like an opening sentence of, so why medicine? Make it personal, make it specific. Try to avoid cliches like, I've always wanted to be a doctor. I've wanted to be a doctor since I was 5 years old. Don't say that. Instead, use an experience that sparked your interest. For example, my interest in medicine grew when I saw how a doctor's calm explanation reduced the patient's anxiety during work experience. Now that I've mentioned work experience, I actually forgot to say that when emailing for work experience, I have attached a link that you can click and it tells you how to structure your emails in a good professional way so you increase your likelihood of getting a response. With my experience in getting work experience, I actually emailed one hospital and found around 60 emails, and out of the 60 emails, I got one response. So remember, the more you email, the higher the likelihood that you will be successful in attaining work experience. So you can't just rely on, oh, I emailed them one or two times, and why aren't they responding? They are busy people. So you need to up yourself, be more resilient and email as many people as you can so you can increase your chances. Anyways, moving on, academic curiosity. So show that you're not just doing the bare minimum. So, did you read a book? Did you attend a lecture? Are you doing an EPQ related to medicine? Did it spark questions about critical thinking? So, anything that's just beyond your A levels, make sure to mention that. Again, work experience, pick two, three experiences and go into depth. Don't just say what you did, explain what you learned. So, volunteering at a care home taught me that listening is sometimes the most valuable part of care. Residents value conversation as much as medical help. So, make sure you reflect instead of listing. Again, can you just move on to the next slide, please? Yeah, so the next question that I believe you get, what else have you done to prepare outside of education? So this is where you should be able to talk about extracurriculars. So show you're a well-rounded person. Sports can show teamwork and resilience. Music can show discipline. Part-time jobs show responsibility. So always link them back to skills useful for medicine and make sure at the end of each question you are summarizing your motivation and enthusiasm and show that you understand medicine is a lifelong commitment and no cliches. because I believe common mistakes that you should probably be avoiding and you should be taking note of this. Listing every single achievement with no reflection is a common mistake. Overusing cliches is a common mistake. And also linking back to the question. So forgetting to link skills back to medicine is also a common mistake that you should avoid. So always make sure you're linking back to the bigger picture. So the best statements tell a story. They show how your experiences shaped your motivation and what skills you've developed that will make you a good doctor. Yeah, that's all I have on personal statement. Again, watch, there are some really good YouTube videos on this, so do your own research as well.
Now, interviews. So there are different types, MMI, multiple mini interviews. There are short stations of questions, and the stations can include role play, personal statement, ethical scenarios, and other scenarios, interpersonal skills, hot topics, um, and also panel interviews, which are longer conversations with 2 to 3 interviewers, but the questions they ask are quite similar to MMIs. And I would say most medical schools now have changed to MMIs. And what they can assess, motivation for medicine, different interpersonal skills relevant to medicine that are listed here, ethical reasoning as well. Um, so now I'm going to give you some tips to help you prepare. So I would say read NHS hot topics, um, such as waiting times, strikes, COVID, artificial intelligence. And the news will also help you keep on track with any current NHS hot topics. There is also a book here that is commonly used by people, but irrespective of what is in the book, keep on track with the latest medical news, as this book can be updated sometimes. Next slide, please. I would also say practice role play, so explaining to a child, different word problems and breaking news as well. Also, know your personal statement inside out, reflect on work experience, know your medical ethics and scenarios, such as scenarios related to confidentiality or consent. And I would say, in general, it's less about knowing everything, although there is basic knowledge that medical schools will expect you to know to show commitment to knowing and understanding what a medical degree consists of. But it's more about showing how you think and put yourself across. So if an interviewer asks you a difficult question, don't give up, but say your thought processes aloud. So in my UCL interview, I was asked questions that I didn't know the answer to, and I still got my UCL offer. So at the end of the day, come off as genuine. The interviewers aren't trying to catch you out. They just want to see your potential, your communication skills, and your enthusiasm for medicine. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now let's be realistic. Medicine is one of the most competitive courses out there, and the fact that you're like well done that you're here, it really does show resilience and your motivation. Yeah, medicine is one of the most competitive courses out there, and sometimes even really strong candidates don't get in the first time. But that's not the end of the journey in the slightest. In fact, many doctors didn't get in on their first attempt. What matters is resilience and how you use that time. So I know of a lot of people that took gap years and they are very successful doctors right now. One option is gap year. So this can be incredibly valuable. You could volunteer in healthcare, you could work in a care home, you could travel, or even take a break after the stress of A levels. And most people who reapply after a gap year feel more confident and better prepared. Another route, if you don't get in first time round, is studying abroad. Medicine is offered in places like Ireland, Eastern Europe, or even the Caribbean, and many graduates return to practice in the UK. It is a different experience, but still a valid pathway. And there are challenges that come with that, but there are still other options. So there's the option of taking another alternative degree, like biomedical sciences, pharmacy, and some of these allow you actually to transfer into medicine later. So you would need to check out those websites and do your own research on that. But there are actually quite a few universities that allow you to transfer into medicine in the second year. So yeah, or you could apply. So once you do biomedical sciences, you could apply for graduate entry medicine. And in fact, many graduate entry students bring fresh perspectives to medicine because of their different backgrounds. And finally, some people realize that another healthcare career, for example, nursing, physiotherapy, paramedicine, actually does suit them better. So medicine isn't the only way to make a difference in healthcare. But again, this is not the end of the journey. Um, so the key message is this. A rejection isn't the end, it's just a detour. There are always options, and resilience is one of the most important qualities in a future doctor. So don't worry, you have got options and you have got support. Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you for listening. And we do have a time for a Q&A. Also, lastly, here it says at the end, bottom, YouTube. So I've started a YouTube channel this summer, and it's because I want to document my journey through medical school. So if you want to follow the journey and actually want to see what it's like to be a medical student, feel free to type that out into YouTube and follow or subscribe. I do actually, I'm currently editing how I personally got into medicine. So in addition to what we've presented today, which was quite short, 30 minutes, you'll get some more tips on board into applying to medicine through that video. I believe that it will be out very, very soon in a few, 1 or 2 days. So if that's something you want to watch, definitely type that out onto YouTube. But if there are any questions, please pop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask any questions about anything. I don't think there are any questions. Oh, what's m oh, okay, we've got quite a few. What's your favorite part about being a med student? Um, Definitely, I actually really enjoy anatomy, so I do get my anatomy lab sessions. And you really get to see anatomy very much in detail, and it really does stay in your head because I'm a visual learner. I also really like it's a very social degree, so I like communicating with people and seeing lots of different people and meeting many different people. Myri, do you want to answer the next one?
What is the most difficult section of the UCAT? So for me, it was verbal reasoning, just because of the huge passages that you get. So um, I would just say just to practice a skim reading. Practice is the only thing really I would say that mainly helps. And also watching YouTube videos as well on people answering verbal reasoning questions and how they approach these sections. So you can see different perspectives on how people go about with these sections.
Yeah. There are some actually really good videos teaching you how to skim read if you want to help yourself with verbal reasoning, because I do agree verbal reasoning is quite a difficult section, it's quite tough. So if you want to get through that, start reading books, skim reading, just watch those videos. How did you select your IBSC? Is it usual to get the one you want? Okay, so for with UCL, we actually have an application process. So unfortunately, the IBSC you apply for isn't guaranteed. It's almost writing. So I had to write a personal statement. Everyone has to write a personal statement again. So bringing back trauma from year 13. But yeah, I had to write a personal statement for surgical sciences. I selected it because I'm actually quite interested in surgery, and they allow you the opportunity to shadow a lot of surgeons, which I'm particularly excited for. So my IBSc hasn't properly started yet, but I'm excited for that opportunity. So that's one of the main reasons I chose. But there are definitely so many different options like global health management, pediatrics. Like pediatrics is my friends are saying that it's really, really fun and they're gaining a lot out of it. There's maths and computer science, so if you want to learn how to code, again, it's all down to your preference. Mary, next one.
Also adding on to the IBSC point, I had my IBSC talk yesterday, so I was told that UCL is quite good with giving the IBSC that you want. So 94% of people do usually get their first or second options. But so the next question, what part of the application process did you find the most difficult? For me, I think it was interviews because just because of the uncertainty of what you'll get, um, and the fact that they'll put you on the spot. But I would say again, practice is so important. Just practice with as many people. They don't even have to be medics. Um, Anyone can give you a feedback on your communication. So practice as many different questions. You can literally just search questions up on the internet and just practice them. Zainab,
Okay,
next up.
next question. Is virtual work experience equivalent to physical work experience, and do university accept virtual work experience? Quite a good question. I would say reflecting on the virtual work experience is equivalent to reflecting on your physical work experience. However, with virtual work experience, you can still talk about what you've gained out of it. So, what's important in the personal statement is reflecting on the skills you have witnessed and like how you'd like to apply that to yourself as a future medical student. Although physical work experience is slightly better, you still can gain a lot out of virtual work experience, and you can definitely write that in your personal statement. Also, if you're really struggling to find physical work experience, again, email, just email as many people as possible. You could talk about volunteering at a care home. You could talk about your job if you have a part-time job. You could talk about anything as long as you're reflecting on that and you're showing resilience, and your motivations for medicine.
So next question, was there anything in your UCL interview particularly different to other MMIs from other unis? I wouldn't say there was anything particularly different. Um, I would say that UCL was my hardest interview as they asked a lot of follow-up questions for me. So I think that's the most different to the other unis.
With the
Zainab, do you have
UCL,
anything to
with the
add?
UCL interview, they when I got my offer for the interview, they actually give you a page that congratulates you on getting the interview, and then a few bullet points on what could potentially come up in the interview, which I personally found quite useful because you can prepare those points in detail and know your ideas and thoughts on those before actually entering the MMI stations. So definitely do your own research. Again, there are loads of stuff online on how the MMIs work. There are loads of different stations, practice stations that you can do with your friends. But yeah, that's all I have to say on that. Any other questions? You can ask again if you guys have asked one question, you can still ask more.
All right, I think we'll move on. And if there are any questions in the chat, then you can maybe respond through text. And yeah, so let's move on. We have a case study, which is about Charlie Gard. And so if I can have Ahmed to do this, please.
Hi, I'm Ahmed. Thank you very much, Zainab and Mayuri, for presenting. It was really insightful, and I think I learned quite a bit from that. So I'm going to be presenting the Charlie Gard case, which was a right to life debate back in 2017. It was highly publicized, so you guys might have heard of it. Could you please move on to the next slide? Thank you. So who was Charlie Gard? Charlie Gard was born on August 4th, 2016 to his parents, Connie Yates and Chris Gard. He was born with MDDS, which is mitochondrial DNA depletive syndrome, which affected him throughout his life. And he was born at Great Osmond Street Hospital, known as GOSH, and that's what I'll be referring to later on in this presentation. He died 11 months after he was born on July 28th, 2017, after a long battle across multiple courts. Could you please move on? Thank you. So what is MDDS? MDDS is a group of rare genetic disorders characterized by a significant reduction in the amount of mitochondrial DNA within affected tissue. So the mitochondria didn't have enough DNA to replicate within the tissue affected. So this depletion impaired the cellular energy metabolism, so the chemical reactions that could occur, as in respiration, leading to progressive and multisystemic organ dysfunction. Multisystemic organ dysfunction is in like the organs across multiple systems, such as the circulatory system or the digestive system, weren't able to function as they regularly would have been able to. And this affected multiple tissues, especially those with high energy demands, such as the brain, the liver, and the muscles. So the onset of MDDS is usually in infancy or early childhood, including myopathic, which is muscle predominant systems, high hepatocerebral, which is related to the liver and brain involvement, uh, encephalomyopathic, which is brain and muscles together, and neurogastrointestinal, which is the brain and the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract. So MDDS is often fatal in early life, especially when you have other more severe subtypes. So what was the central conflict of the two arguments between the hospital and the parents? So the hospital's position, which they maintained throughout the whole battle, was that the experimental treatment that Charlie Gard could have had would be futile. It wouldn't help him or help his recovery. Charlie Gard was suffering and he had no prospect of recovery. Like every second he was alive, he was feeling pain. So they thought there was no prospect of him recovering and getting better. They also believed that it was in his best interest, rather than to live out the rest of his life in pain and on life support, to have a dignified death. And that's why they thought that life support should be withdrawn. The parents' position was that they wanted to try the experimental nucleoside treatment in the chance that it was able to help him get better. They were willing to take Charlie to the USA for treatment. They raised funding through crowdfunding, 1.3 million roughly, and they believe that it was Charlie should have a chance to live. So they should do whatever is possible to give Charlie a chance to live. So what is the timeline of events? So Charlie, as we said before, was born on August 2016. 2 months later, in October, he was transferred to Gosh, the hospital I mentioned earlier, because of his deteriorating condition. Then again, 3 months later, in January 2017, doctors concluded that artificial life support, which Charlie was on, that was keeping him alive, should be cut, and that it was not in his best interest to keep him alive. Then February 24th is when Gosh applied to Family Division of High Court for their final decision. And then in March 3rd, Mr. Justice Francis begins hearing their case, so he begins the case in the court officially. And then April 11th, the High Court rules in favor of Gosh. And then June 8th, the UK Supreme Court rejects the parents' appeal against the initial decision. Then in June 27th, the European Court of Human Rights rejects their case as well, which they applied to earlier. Then July 13th, Gosh applies for fresh hearing due to new evidence that the parents claimed. And in July 24th, the High Court maintains their original decision and rejects their appeal. So there was a few key legal frameworks. So the key legal frameworks, these are related to the UK and medical practice within the NHS. So the key legal principles were the best interest standard, which is a standard for deciding what is in somebody's best interests. So in this case, the best interest standard gave doctors the preliminary and the larger proportion and the decision regarding to what's in the child's best interest and what isn't. So the doctors in this case decided that it was within the child's best interest to have the life support cut out and that it was paramount for his welfare. The parental rights, so parental rights are limited because of the best interest standard. Medical authority, which was given to the doctors due to the best interest standard, and then the court's role, which acted as the final arbiter when parents and doctors disagree to make the final decision. So these were mostly due to the Children's Act in 1989 and the Human Rights Act of 1998. The Human Rights Act is an international law, whereas Children's Act is just within the UK. So Mr. Justice Francis of the High Court, he's the one who rejected the appeal twice. So he agreed with the doctors where they stated that the treatment would be futile. Charlie had no quality of life due to him constantly suffering at the hospital on life support. Experimental treatment could cause further suffering to him. If it didn't work, it could just cause him more pain, and then that devalues him. And then it was within his best interest to allow him a natural death. So using this to make his final decision, he stated that Charlie's best interest would require his treatment to end. Next slide, please. Thank you. So international involvement. So multiple different bodies outside of the UK got involved with the Charlie Gard case. So Pope Francis offered for Charlie to be treated at the Vatican hospital. President Donald Trump expressed his support for the parents' position. The US Congress even gave Charlie Gard permanent US residency for his treatment, while international medical experts gave alternative opinions. So they gave other options other than just the experimental nucleotides treatment, which could help support Charlie's condition. And then Bambino Gesù Hospital, which is the hospital mentioned from Vatican City, offered the experimental treatment that would be needed for Charlie. So the media and public also had a big role to play. So there was intense scrutiny of the Charlie Gard case online, with people hashtagging Charlie's fight, and multiple campaigns ran on the internet, and also a GoFundMe that raised 1.3 million roughly in by crowdfunding. Then public demonstrations like protests outside of Gosh, death threats even made to the medical staff, and a polarized public opinion. So basically just a negative opinion on the medical care towards Charlie Gard. And then looking at pro-treatment arguments, these are just the arguments that they use as a basis for their decision. So parental authority, they thought that parental authority should have the ultimate say over the doctor's say, as they should have patient autonomy. The sanctity of life, that every life has inherent value, and by stripping Charlie Gard of his life, you remove any value he has. Hope and chance for recovery, so that the experimental treatment, there was a likelihood, possibility that it could, maybe low chance, but that it could help him recover. The medical uncertainty, again, that doctors, they're not always 100% right. You can't be for certain that the experimental treatment won't work. The resource availability, because of the crowdfunding, they had already raised 1.3 million. So the costs for the concerns over costs did not matter to them. And religious perspective, that life is sacred regardless of quality. So even if his quality is low, they would still want him to continue living. Then these are the arguments against that were used by the opposing counsel. So the child's best interest, again, by the law I mentioned earlier, this prevented suffering is paramount. So it stated that Charlie should not have to suffer, and that preventing his suffering is the most important thing to consider in this scenario. Then medical futility, that treating him through the experimental treatment is unlikely to benefit him. Then quality of life, he'd undergone severe brain damage due to his condition, and that meant that he might not have a meaningful existence even if he was able to recover somehow. Then professional judgment, the medical experts were the best to decide because of their medical knowledge. Then one of the others was avoiding false hopes, so they did not want unrealistic expectations to cause more pain to the families or others. And resource allocation that even private hospitals do still have ethical implications that they do have to comply to. Then international comparisons. So these can be drawn with the UK system, which has the best interest standard, and the intervention common, which we saw in the Charlie Gard case. Compared to the US, they have greater parental authority. So that's why the US said that if they had brought Charlie Gard to the US, they would have been able to undergo the treatment. And in the US, however, that is variable by state. Some states may have lower or greater parental authority. There are cultural differences, so views on medical authority and family rights differ across the world, and legal frameworks also differ, as different approaches to pediatric medical decisions are made all over the world. So, what has been the impact of Charlie's case? So, the legal significance of Charlie's case was that it reinforced the best interest standard, which meant that shows that the best interest standard is non-contestable, is something that must be followed by all medical professionals. It clarified the limit of parental authority. It meant that parental authority did not bypass the best interest standard. It also set precedent for similar cases. So if you don't know what precedent is, it's like when something occurs in court and then that can be made into something like a law or something that can be used in the future. If a similar case comes up, it can be looked at basically like that. You can go back and look what the final decision on that case was and use that as a decisive measure for your case as well. So that meant that in the future, any case like this would also mean that the doctor's say was given and the parents would be rejected. And it also influenced subsequent medical law. So any law published after would have taken this into account. So what lessons were learned for medical professionals from this case? So it meant that it clarified how important clear, compassionate communication is, because the parents, of course, didn't feel like they had much of a say. So better communication might have helped with that. Need for better support systems for families. So families suffering like this, if they had more support, maybe they would have been able to decide to let Charlie go by themselves. Values of ethics consultation early in the process. So if there's ethics consultation early, maybe the families again wouldn't have pushed so far. And balancing hope with the realistic expectation, allowing the families to feel hope while ensuring that they don't think that Charlie will survive regardless of what happens. So references for further reading if you want to read up on similar cases or this case. So Great Osmond Street Hospital versus Yates of 2017, EWHC of 1909, the European Court of Human Rights decision in 2017, and then this book called Hard Lessons: Learning from the Charlie Gard Case, which is Practical Ethics by Oxford, published in 2017. The Charlie Gard Case: British and American Approaches by PMC, and various news reports and medical ethics journals from 2017 to 2018 would also provide good reading material for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Can I have Mavish for the epiretinal membrane, please? Guys, I do appreciate it's taking it has been dragged, but thank you for staying and yeah. I think there are some technical difficulties. I'll just start presenting. So, an epiretinal membrane, ERM, is a thin, fibrous, and
Hello?
semi-permanent. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I've been speaking for the last minute. I didn't know. I was on mute. Sorry.
It's okay.
Um, Okay, should I start from the beginning? Right. The epiretinal membrane, it's a thin, fibrous, and semi-transparent tissue. It's in the back of your retina. No, the inner surface of your retina, over the macula. It acts as a cellophane wrap. So if you don't know what that is, because I had to search that up, it's like a thin plasticky material. Um, so it acts like a thin cover over the retina. It can contract and distort the retina, so it leads to your vision changing. It's usually non-cancerous and slow growing. Um, you may have heard it referred to as a macular pucker. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the anatomy of it. The retina is a light-sensitive tissue in the back of your eye. The macula is a central part of the retina for fine vision. The vitreous is a gel-like substance filling the eye. So what happens in our ERM? With age, which is most common, is about 80 to 90%, or injury, the vitreous can pull away from the retina, and this can stimulate glial cells to proliferate and migrate to the surface of the macula. Um, and this contracts and causes retinal distortion, which causes our vision to change. Next slide. Okay. How common is ERM? ERM becomes more common as people get older, especially after the age of 50. Like I said, it affects around 2% to 20% of people, depending on age and health. It's slightly more common in women. Um, it can affect one or both eyes. I think it's normally both eyes, and it's often found during regular eye exams, sometimes even before the symptoms appear. Okay, so how is ERM diagnosed? The eye doctor, or I should have put optometrist, at looks at the back of the eye with special tools. I didn't list it, but I can research it and then give it to Serena to put in the chat. They may see a shiny membrane over the macula, the thin thing that I said before. The retina may look wrinkled or pulled. Optical coherence tomography, an OCT, I've heard of. It's a special scan that shows a detailed cross-section of the retina. It shows at the membrane and how much the retina is affected. A test called fluorescein angiography. You might have heard of that. It checks the blood flow and rules out other problems. Tests like Amsler grid, which will be mentioned again, helps patients notice their changes in vision. Okay, how is it treated? If the symptoms are mild or not that noticeable, doctors may just monitor it and see if it worsens over time. Patients use tools like the Amsler grid to watch for vision changes. And if the symptoms are severe, surgery called vitrectomy can remove the membrane. The surgeon removes the vitreous gel and carefully peels off the membrane. Sometimes the internal lining membrane, the ILM, is also removed to reduce the chance of the membrane coming back and to cause further problems. The surgery is generally safe, but carries some risks, like retinal problems or cataract formation. Special dyes can be used during surgery to make the membrane easier to see and to then remove. Okay, so causes and risk factors. So, for primary ERM, the most common, as I said before, yeah, it says 80 to 90% is age related when you become over 50. There's no obvious cause. But for secondary ERM, I'll go through some of them. There is diabetic retinopathy, which is when it's caused by your diabetes. A retinal detachment or tear, so that's like if you do it physically. Eye surgeries, risk factors. If you're over 50, eye surgeries, diabetes. If you have a history of retinal detachment, and inflammatory eye conditions. New developments in research. New, less invasive surgical techniques have made a recovery so it's faster and safer now. Often surgeons use real-time OCT scans that we looked at before during surgery to help remove the membrane more precisely, also using the dyes that we said before. Research is ongoing and developing into medicines that might prevent the membrane from forming or coming back and causing more issues. Scientists are studying the biology of the ERM to find new treatments in the future. A summary of this. The epiretinal membrane is a common eye condition where thin scar tissue forms on the retina, causing vision problems like distortion and blurriness. It mostly affects older people, normally over the age 50, and it can be caused by aging or the eye diseases like tears in the retina. Diagnosis is made through eye exams and detailed imaging scans. Treatment depends on how bad the symptoms are, so sometimes it can just be observed, or sometimes you may need surgery. Surgery often helps improve vision, especially if done early. New research is looking at better ways to treat and prevent this condition.
Thank you very much, Mavish. Now we're just going to go over the 7 guiding principles and the NHS core values, and then we'll end the webinar for today. So yeah, the 6 core values are firstly putting patients first, which is really important because patients need to come first before any organizational or personal interests. And so that is really important. Respect and dignity is also really important. Every patient deserves to be valued as an individual, regardless of backgrounds or your personal prejudices. Commitment to the quality of care. So every medic, physician, whatever, healthcare professional, they have to strive for safe and effective treatments. Compassion is really important. Kindness in every interaction is imperative. Improving health and well-being should be the focus. Medics should focus on prevention and the education and long-term health of the patients, and everyone counts. So the theory of utilitarianism, so that's where making sure resources are distributed freely and that everyone matters. And yeah, they're all kind of the same thing. You just need to respect and, dignify the patients with your compassion and your commitment to caring for their health and well-being. So you could be asked some interview questions, as mentioned previously by Mayuri and Zainab. You might have MMI questions with interviews if you apply to unis, or you might have panel interviews. So having this sort of knowledge about the core values would be helpful because you can apply that knowledge into any question or role play that they might give you. So some questions could be, why do you want to work for the NHS? You could talk about, compassion and how you want to take care of patients and how you want to dignify them. What values should a doctor have? So again, compassion, empathy, caring for others and stuff like that. How would you handle a scenario where fairness or respect is at risk? So that comes with how you would want to dignify a patient and how you would want to take care of them and value their decisions about their healthcare process. And so using this knowledge about your 6 core values, and you need to tie that back to your answers. And yeah, so 7 guiding principles. So this is the NHS. So that's NHS guiding principles. So the NHS wants comprehensive service. So there shouldn't be any discrimination, and there should be equal access for all patients of different backgrounds. And the access needs to be based on needs and not material wealth or their prestige, like the person. So if there was a prime minister and there was like a teacher, both would get access to treatment based on needs. So that's the other guiding principle. And services need to be shaped around patients. So there should be a patient-centered approach to any, medical advancements or any treatments that are being provided to patients. There should be equality and fairness. So the NHS aims to eliminate discrimination and reduce health inequalities. And there should be an efficient use of resources because the NHS uses taxpayer funds, and it needs to be used responsibly to provide the best possible care for every patient. And the NHS also needs to be accountable to the public. They need to be transparent and open to patients and communities. So, for example, if there's a case like the Charlie Gard case, they need to be accountable to the public with that case and what they're doing about it, because at the end of the day, the NHS is a national health service as provided by the name. And so it is for the public, it is for for the UK. So they need to be transparent to the public. There should be a highest standard of care. So every medic in the NHS that are working, they need to be committed to providing safe, effective, and high quality care, and that applies to interviews again. So, you can talk about excellence and professionalism. So it shows that you're excellent and your professionalism in a sense because you're keeping track of what the NHS values, which shows that you're, well informed about your decision into applying to medicine. And that does give a really good impact when you're, going into your interview, when you're doing your personal statement. And so you understand that patients come first, you respect autonomy and informed consent, and you understand that, patients deserve the best value of treatment for their money, for their taxes, and that you want to, as a medic, you want to promote prevention of certain diseases happening. So there's a three-step method. Identify which NHS value principle relates to this and explain. So you could talk about how this guiding principle could be taken into practice and apply. So give a short example of how a doctor would demonstrate this. So an example question, a patient refuses treatment that you know would benefit them. So what would you do? If you could type that in the chat, I'll wait for like a couple minutes, and if no one does, then I'll just, put the answer up. So think for this question, think about the core values, think about the guiding principles that we just went over. What would you consider if you were in a situation like this? All right, I have a response in the chat. Respect their decision, but also inform them of the pros and cons of the treatment clearly so they make an informed decision. I think that's quite right. Judge whether they fit the right to consent, so capacity. And if they do, ensure they are well informed of the consequences of not taking the treatment and allowing them to refuse and respect, the decision. So yeah, that is kind of the gist of it. That is, so you need to consider the core value of respect and dignity. You must respect their autonomy. But this differs to if they don't have capacity. So there is a law for that. There's a Capacity Act. But if, the patient is showing that they have capacity to make an informed decision, you must respect their autonomy because you do need to keep a patient's interest at heart. So you need to engage in decision making and you need to decide what is the best for the patient. And if they decide for themselves, then you do need to respect that and dignify their decision. So again, excellence and professionalism, that's a core value. You need to provide clear and evidence-based advice on what are the pros and cons of not taking a certain treatment. So again, as people said, you guys are right. And yeah, so we'll do a little, scenario as we did last time. So this is going to be, we're going to have three situations. It's a busy Saturday evening in the A&E. You have given a 55-year-old patient with chest pain who arrived 3.5 hours ago. Initial ECG and blood suggest possible N STEMI. So that is like the ST levels are elevated. So this could imply that there is a myocardial infarction. We went over this last week, if you remember. But cardiology is overwhelmed, so there's like a lot of patients. And the 4 hour target is approaching, and your department manager is pressuring you to discharge or admit them to a medical ward to avoid breaching the target. So, what would you do? Here are the options. Please select one. And yeah. I'm getting a couple responses with people saying D. All of them are saying D. Um, and the answer is actually C. So the reason for that is the NICE guidelines and the NHS patient safety protocols. So according to them, patient safety must never be compromised to meet targets. And the NSTMI requires specialist cardiology assessment before discharge because if there are ST elevated levels, then that shows that there might be a really, really big danger of a myocardial infarction. So that's like cardiac disease. It could be a heart attack. It could be anything. And so there must be a cardiology assessment before discharge. Because what if they get a heart attack? You didn't take the patient's interest at heart. And the 4 hour target, it is important for flow, it is important for the effectiveness of the NHS, but it can't override clinical safety and patient interest. So proper documentation of clinical reasoning for breach is also essential. And recent NHS guidelines emphasize that targets should support, not replace clinical judgment. So the 4 hour target, it should support it, but it can't replace clinical judgment and um, you know, evidence that a patient might be at risk of a certain disease. Another situation, um, a 70-year-old patient with early dementia refuses a life-saving amputation for severe diabetic gangrene. So they understand that they will die without surgery, but state, I'd rather die with both legs. The family is pressuring you to declare them lacking capacity and proceed with surgery. Here are the options. What would you do? So again, think about the medical ethics that you have learned about, that you have read, or the the principles, the guiding principles, and the core values to help you make a decision. Okay, I've got a message saying B. I've some are saying C. Um, let's see. Yeah, so we have a couple B's and C's. So the answer is B. Under the Mental Capacity Act 2005, as I mentioned previously, a person is presumed to have capacity unless proven otherwise. Understanding consequences, including death, suggests retained capacity, even though, the patient is at early stages of dementia. Understanding consequences of not getting a certain medical treatment suggests that there is retained capacity. So an unwise decision doesn't automatically indicate lack of capacity. Um, and so a patient's refusal must be respected if they have capacity, because again, if you refer back, You must respect and dignify the patient. So, documenting capacity assessment thoroughly and considering second options. If you're uncertain is necessary, maybe talking to another colleague or a senior medic might help you make a decision, but you need to make sure that you don't breach confidentiality. Okay, last situation before we end the meeting. A 16-year-old has been brought in unconscious after a road traffic accident. They need emergency surgery for internal bleeding. Parents cannot be contacted immediately, but an adult sibling is present and is willing to give consent. What would you do? Okay, I've got an answer saying C, A. Okay, we'll move on. So the answer is C. According to the NHS consent guidelines and the Children Act, because the patient is 16, so technically still a child, in life-threatening emergencies, treatment can be proceeded without consent when delay would risk life. So the patient has internal bleeding, and that can risk life. So that is a life-threatening emergency, so you must start treatment. And adult siblings cannot give consent for minors' treatments. It needs to be their parents. The emergency exception allows treatment necessary to preserve life or prevent serious harm. And you must document the emergency circumstances thoroughly to make sure that you're following the NHS consent guidelines. And you need to continue efforts to contact parents and guardians because they deserve to know that their child went through the accident, and also come for treatments, and review with parents as soon as possible after emergency treatment. So yeah, that's it for this week's seminar. Another reminder is that the newsletter applications are still open. We have about 31 applications so far, and the deadline is the 1st of October. Thank you for sticking till the end. I'll post the attendance form in the chat. Please make sure to fill it out. And yeah, thank you very much.